Okay.
Hello, everyone. I am Gia Pace. I'm a public programs coordinator here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. It is a pleasure to welcome you to today's Stories Survive program with Ivan Vamos. Ivan is a Holocaust survivor born in Budapest, Hungary, whose story of loss, survival, and hope offers powerful lessons for us today. Ivan is also a retired public servant, having served for many years as Deputy Commissioner for Planning and Development at the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Please feel free to share questions for Ivan in the Zoom Q&A box during his presentation, and we'll get to as many questions as we can towards the end of the hour. Without further ado, welcome, Ivan, and thank you for being here. Feel free to get started.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you that are willing to come and listen to me on such a beautiful day. Um, I hope the program will be useful to you, but if there are questions, I'm happy to resolve them either during the meeting or afterwards, or even afterwards by email. Uh, I usually start my presentation to school kids by saying that my mother had a few stories when I was born, which of course I don't remember, but the stories were at birth, the doctor was crying, an old Jewish doctor, and my mother, being worried, asked, of course, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Who can bring a child into this world?" Well, she brought a child in anyway. Reason was, it was in 1938, March, when the Germans were marching into Austria, taking over without opposition. And the drastic uh, uh, laws that Germany had would apply to Austria, and that was pretty apparent that was going to be happening. Hungary was still a little bit less uh, virulent in this sense, but they had been for a long time having limits to Jews, Gypsies, other targeted people. There was a law called numerus clausus, and that deals with my second story from my mother, which was right after my birth. My mother was showing me off the family, and somebody came into the room. She didn't see who. Everybody left to see that person. It was her brother, whom she called Booby because he was young and small for quite a while. And Booby later on to be called Bob instead, uh, uh, had got a visa, and it was a marvelous thing. He could get out and go somewhere. It was very difficult to get. He was going to the United States. This was a quirk of good luck coming back from end of World War I, but I won't go into that story. Uh, but he was unique in that sense, and everybody was congratulating him. Of course, they were happy to have another grandchild or another cousin or whatever, me. Uh, my mother apparently was also trying at the same time to get out pretty soon thereafter. Uh, this is a picture from her passport in 1939. It's a 1939 passport, which lists me as an infant to be carried with her, but that never really happened. Uh, us leaving at that time, that is. But Uncle Bob did leave, uh, and he then had taken quite a bit of photo equipment from the family, my mother's family, Leon family, for 50-year-old photo store. Uh, and reestablished that photo store in Brooklyn, New York. My mother got a much smaller photo store in Budapest, and that's where a lot of the negatives and the other material went. So she was a photographer. She was a very good photographer, and she did that part-time while she also was at home with me. And my father was part of the Vamos family, which had a very well-established woodworking factory, mainly made moldings, picture frames, similar specialized wooden equipment, wooden materials that were used for other decorations. And this was very successful as a business. My father, his brother, and my grandfather were well established, and my grandfather had assumed that Hungary would remain fairly safe. He was a World War I veteran, very proud of it. And Army, I believe, captain or equivalent to a captain in the Austro-Hungarian army, and very critical of that corporal that was running Germany. Who was the corporal? Hitler. That's as high as he got, and my grandfather just couldn't imagine people following a corporal when they had very fine generals and other learned people. But my grandfather was wrong. He also depended on Hungary being unique in being protective of their Jewish people, in spite of us being limited by numerous clauses. So I would have been, if things would have gone on, I would have been limited in my education. I would have been limited in the occupations I could pursue, all sorts of things that I could own and manage. But I would have been safe in Hungary if things stayed the way they were in 1938 through 1940. The Leon family tried very hard to get out, and they managed to get one out after another in a way which could take another long story to tell. But we were staying. We were part of the Vamos family. And from my perspective as a little kid, things were doing okay. I had good food. We were relatively safe. Over time, things got more limiting as far as where we could go. The theaters, the pools began to be closed, but we had a summer place that we could go to, small place called Zugliget, and we could go there. We could have some swimming, hiking, all sorts of things. Now, Nia is going to show some pictures that I drew. I put my stories together in a strange way. And this will begin this picture of the 4 kids and my dog. In Zuliget, I was now playing only with these other 3 kids because I was a Jew. The kids in the neighborhood, which were in the top picture, wouldn't play with me, though they were very happy beforehand to come in and do all sorts of mischief in the factory, jump into the sawdust piles, for example, and my grandfather would yell at us. later on, after I drew all these pictures, I wrote the story to go with it, then developed endnotes, and I'm continually ending to it. And a relative of ours, Uncle Bob's wife by second marriage, which happened in their 80s, one more story that I won't go into, found pictures that she had. And here are the four kids that I hung around with. I was the one with the suspenders in that picture. But if you scroll down on the picture, you will see that we left. Now, why did we leave? Well, it could be a number of things. I was just following what my mother told me to do. But by that time, my father, who was pictured here with me, and it was probably the last time I had seen him, had been called into what in Hungary was called a munkaszolgálat. It's work servants. In some books, they call them conscripted slaves. But they were not really slaves because some of their overseers basically wanted to kill them either through work or just outright kill them at various points. So the military was using them, and in some senses, they were being killed perhaps more slowly. This was bad news. They also got to see some horrific scenes, which they may have been able to get information back home. And I mentioned that my mother was a photographer and she had a photo store in Budapest. Well, the photo store probably ran primarily for Jewish customers that were trying to get false papers of various sorts. You could duplicate official documents, then use them, or you could get passport photos, whatever. It's very likely that she talked about this to her customers in that store. So information came in from the people that were trying to get specialized papers, false papers perhaps. And at the same time, information came in from the munkaszolgálat, who had ways in Russia and Yugoslavia seeing what atrocities are being committed. So she was worried by that time, but there were additional direct things that were happening. One day, my grandfather was called in by the military. He got dressed into his full uniform, all his medals, all his awards, with him, a sword. He had a sword with him, and reported to the military along with a number of colleagues. He just disappeared for weeks, maybe a month, maybe more. I don't know. But I knew it was a long time. Then he got dumped in front of the house, really half dead. And we got taken in, and surprisingly, he revived. But I think from the perspective of the Hungarian military, he would probably die at home. His main complaint at that point was he was being beaten by a buck private, the lowest of the low. to be beating a captain. How could they? They had basically said that these were disloyal people, all these Jews. They were handing information back to the Allies. They were going to jeopardize the war effort, whatever. And they beat him and they starved him. But he got back home. So that was one piece of information. Now, probably right after that, maybe even before, there was information coming in from the military again. I went with my mother, along with other mothers and mothers of young children and mothers of young conscripts. And this was that his entire unit, and the military rather gruffly, us kids were separate, looking at equipment, being watched by an old lady, rather gruffly told them that everybody got killed. Big accident, kaput, everybody's done. Go home. Stop sniveling. Apparently that was about what they said. And the mothers went home, of course, quite distraught and crying, and all sorts of scenes outside of the barracks where they were harshly ushered out. And they were saying to each other, meggyilkoltak, they had killed them. Military said it was an accident. The mothers said they were murdered. Later on, from all the 50,000 conscript that went in, about 10%, 5,000 survived. So they were being killed by the Hungarian guards, by the German guards, perhaps by military action, or probably by military action as well, and accidents. So who knows? But my mother looked at all these things, thought about them, and in 1943, probably in the spring of 1943, late spring, Nia, can I have the last picture from that first page? Okay, sorry about that. Bottom of the page? No, next, before first page before that, we're going to leave Hungary. There we are. We're leaving, not Hungary, but we're leaving Budapest, and we walked a long way. I think we took some trolley cars and things and walked into the countryside. My mother probably knew where to go, maybe not, but while we were walking, I was being rehearsed. I was now István. I wasn't Ivan, I was István. I think the second name was something like Kasal, which is a hay cutter, but I don't know for that for sure, but István I remember very well. It sounds a little bit like Ivan if we make a mistake. So we wound up in a very small village. If you can scroll down a little bit, Nia. There we go. There we are, and we're in a small village. And here we are. It's a small village at the bottom of a hill with forests nearby, planes flying overhead fairly routinely, not necessarily dropping bombs on us, but occasionally coming down or dropping bombs if they were trying to lighten their load, if they were being attacked by fighters and damaged to the point that they're trying to gain elevation. So this was a relatively safe place. And we were in a house of an old lady, quite obese, as you can see. And she had an almost unpronounceable name. all consonants. So she must have been either a Slovak or a Croat, but well accepted by the village. And we were in the same house in a room, but sharing the food. And my mother helped supply the food. And this old lady would be very happily going out into the countryside with me, looking for mushrooms, looking for berries, uh, picking scrap metal when we had scrap shell casings coming back from the plains, uh, bringing back wood from the forest for the fireplace. So I had a job. I'd help. She had help. Now, these days, occasionally going for a walk with one of our very diligent young grandchildren, I can see the benefit of having a 5 or 6-year-old and with their better eyes looking for mushrooms or looking for things in the woods. Once trained, you're pretty good at finding things. Things went well. We were there for quite a while. One interesting thing I remember is that one day there was this rain of tinsel. It was called chaff in some parts of the war. It was called windows in the first operation where it went into being used as an anti-radar screen in Hamburg, the Hamburg military air raid. So this tinsel came down from the sky and we were collecting tinsel, and it was a great scene, very exciting. I don't know what she used it for, but she had gotten a lot of tinsel and I had collected an awful lot of it. She may still be, her family may still be decorating Christmas trees with it. Then things changed a little bit. And I didn't know at the time at all. Maybe my mother did, maybe she didn't. She was going out and buying food or trading things for food. So she, at that point, began to get worried. We had to go into a air raid shelter very often. And by that time, people were asking questions of people in the air raid shelter. You stay in an air raid shelter for hours once the raid starts. And they have not much to do, so they ask questions. Well, when we were asked those questions, they were not that threatening sounding. But then the rural police, the Chender, showed up and began to also inquire, and we were not quite fitting in. We were by that time accepted by the village, but it was clear that there was some suspicion. So there was a problem. Being in the air raid shelter was a problem. Being out of the air raid shelter was, you were suspect. So one reprieve, I had gotten measles. My mother at one point said, "Oh boy, you have measles, but that's great. We don't have to go to the air raid shelter. Nobody wants a kid with measles in the air raid shelter." So that gave us a little bit of a reprieve. And this may have been a little bit later in the spring when the Germans had invaded Hungary in order to control the Hungarian government. The Hungarian government under Miklos Horthy was beginning to make openings for peace negotiations with the Russians, or so it was thought. and the Germans wouldn't have none of that. So they invaded to take over Hungary and set up a more loyal government to the Axis. And this became worrisome because apparently these rural policemen, the Chender, were coming around very haughty with cock's crow feathers on their hats. And they were looking for people to bring into a temporary ghetto and right away send them by train to wherever Germany wanted them to send them to. It turned out to be Auschwitz for the most part, but Treblinka, other places. It seemed that this became worrisome enough that my mother had said, we were leaving to Budapest, the Aries were getting too close, whatever she said to the old lady. We said goodbye and we left. And we showed up at a long walk, less trolley car rides, more long walk. Middle of the night, we showed up at a house. And this was a protected house under one of the neutral nations, probably Sweden. Initially, Sweden under Raoul Wallenberg had established these protected houses and issued some false papers. These were people that were gathered there to become Swedish citizens. The Swiss did the same thing later on. The Spanish legation did some of that later on, and even the Vatican did some of that later on. So you are going to Sweden, and you were protected until the war got over, and then you go to Sweden. And they were protecting you under that ruse. Well, they took us into that house, my mother and I, and it was very crowded. And we went up, it was an apartment house. We went up to an apartment, and there we were ushered into the apartment with a child's room. And I was sent into the child's room. You can see the middle picture, batch of little kids. I didn't draw them all. There were about 40 of them usually there. And the room next door outside with grown-ups arguing with each other, what to do, what's going to happen, what's happening, who's going to clean a bathroom, whatever they were arguing about. It was constant, day and night. Us children, we were pretty happy. When I talk to teenagers, I usually tell them a kid like you, a young person like you, sorry about me calling you a kid, was put in charge of keeping all these little kids happy. What to do? There were no books, there were no toys, but there was a wallpaper along the children's room, and they would point to the wallpaper and they say, "You see that? There was that little girl in a swing. She got into terrible trouble. Let me tell you about the mess she made and the trouble she got in." And the story would go on. Then a boy would come, afterward sometime and lead you through some funny exercises. Everybody jump up and touch your head. Whatever. Sometimes they taught us nasty songs. And we loved that. Oh, we sang them all the time. Grown-ups hated it. But we had a good time. We could talk to each other. I wasn't restricted from talking to people anymore. I could tell them anything I liked. Same with them. So it was a good time, but we were in the same room, same place for probably about 2 months. Then one day, unbeknownst to us, the government changed once again, and the Germans had installed the ultra-rightist Nyilasok. Nyilas means crossed arrow. Nyil is an arrow, and that was their symbol rather than the Hakenkreuz, the swastika. So these people they didn't care about neutral nations. They didn't care about anything. Their role in the world was to kill all the people that didn't fit into Hungary, including Jews, of course, and I presume Slovak residents, I presume all kinds of other people that were on their list. Gypsies, of course, Roma people in their terms. These people showed up at the apartment house we were in, and they were with attack dogs. They were shooting weapons into the air, and they were yelling, "Everybody out! We're marching you out, out." We left the apartment house and we were marched to the shoreline of the Danube, where we assembled along the Danube. Here from the web is a picture of people being marched during that time. I don't know how they got the picture, but they did. And here is another picture of this is going on. And Nia, if you would then go to the third picture, which is mine at the bottom of the, back, no, down, there we go. Thank you. Once we got to this shoreline, Danube shoreline, a person, an officer, perhaps a German officer, perhaps Hungarian, separated us, and us children, old people, sick people, anybody else that couldn't be used was sent to one side. Here is on the right of the picture, and on the left side, out of the picture, were those people that could still work. And my mother was sent to that side. I was sent to the children's side, and people were guarding us with weapons, and I didn't know what to do, what would happen next. But my mother, she said, had approached a Budapest policeman, a render, not a chander, a render, a city policeman who was a little bit more sympathetic, and said, "I've got a sweater for my son over there. I've got to go see him, and I've got to give him a sweater. I'll come back," or whatever she said. He said, "Go on." Off she went with the sweater, coming to me, and I came there. She grabbed my arm and we ran, and you can see on the picture that she's running with me holding her hand, and these soldiers turned their weapons around on us, but then we were alongside of the people that were looking into this scene, who were probably Catholic, so they didn't want to shoot into the crowd. So we got away. We went on from there. Nia, scroll down, please. And we just walked around, and we were questioned. We had our false papers. Some of the Nyilas on a corner could be seen. They were sort of ruffians and very strange looking assembly of uniforms by that time. fully armed, but essentially their job was to go find and bring in, or if necessary, kill Jews and others, while the military was actually by that time fending off the uh, uh, Russian and Ukrainian troops that were beginning to siege the city. The Seizure Budapest lasted altogether about 3 months, it is thought. We were questioned, as I said. We got away, fortunately, and we ducked into this burnt out apartment house, probably near the Danube as well. We didn't go very far. And we went up to a top floor, and there with no people there. The place had been abandoned. It was falling down. It was smoldering, probably burning again a little bit. And we stayed in this burnt out apartment. I roamed around looking for things. Then we decided to eat. My mother had brought from that village a bag of something. It was split peas. I didn't know what we had up to that point, but split peas, pretty good food, but bad food for trying to eat raw. We tried, we couldn't do it. We had to cook it. First, we needed water. All the pipes are, of course, broken and everything else, but we found that high in bathrooms, there was a flushing tank. And if the wall stayed up, if the flushing tank stayed up, the water usually stayed in it. So we piled up furniture. My mother climbed up. We looked for various receptacles we could use, and we managed to get water down from there. And we then decided to cook, and the picture shows us cooking on a stove. Now, this place had fireplaces. We didn't cook in fireplaces. My mother explained that smoke would go up the chimney. They'd know that somebody's in there, and they'd go look for us. Well, what about the smoke from the stove that we're cooking with? Wood that I brought. I broken furniture. I gathered it, brought it. And my mother, unfortunately, was a smoker, so we had matches. Or no, if we're building a fire in next to an old side kitchen, it's just smoke coming out of the building. It will look like the building is on fire. Nobody will bother with that. So we were safe because we made believe the building was on fire. Strange world. And we cooked once every 2-3 days, became a mush. Then it nearly froze at night. Then we tried to warm it up. Then we had frozen pea soup or whatever to unthaw. It went on. One of my activities was trying to look at the air raids that were going on all the time in Budapest at the time. And my mother kept me from doing that during the daytime. But at night, she felt safe enough that nobody would see me, but she made me stand in front of the windows which had been blown out already, so there were no glass in them. And I used to watch this air raid going on, and sometimes pretty damn close to us. Once next building was bombed, and part of the staircase fell in, and we had to go to another building, start all over again, gathering old utensils and other things. We also gathered paper. and we use that for insulation in our clothing. And we use that for making fires. We use that for our bedding. And we read from that. Later, I found that by the time I got through with these parts of my life, I was able to read. And when somebody asked whether I had any education at that point, I said I was homeschooled, except we didn't know whose home we were in. But it went on, and it fortunately got us past that point. And one day, out of the window, I saw planes coming down low, strafing the main street. We were on a side street, strafing the main street, and there were red stars on them. Those are Russians with the red stars. Yes, they were Ruski. So we watched, and I said, well, they're here then. No, not yet. And the tanks came, and again with a red star down the main street, and all sorts of battle going on around us. My mother kept us in the apartment, and the battle then was going across the river. The Germans and the Hungarians and some of their allies retreated across the Danube to the Buda side. The Russians controlled our side. And after a while, we decided that we would go back home. Move one picture down, please.
Ivan, we need to take questions in another 2 or 3 minutes. So
okay.
We'll
so anyway, the Russians were there. They fed us. They helped us. And let me just go to the very last picture. Very last thing. There's my passport, and there's my green card. And above that, just quickly, for various reasons, I come to the US on my own. My mother and Czech, she married, were able to come out, and I was then left behind, but about a year later was able to come out with an English signer on my neck. Took a couple of days, and I was then on my way to be a US citizen. There's my green card at the bottom. Let me try to address some other questions. Sorry I took so long.
No, it's great. Thank you. So we have a few questions, and if you have any other questions, please, you can put them in the Q&A or in the chat. Linda asked, what role did Camp Recro play in your success?
Camp Recro. The first summer I was back, the summer was completely a dud. I was at a school which had some games, some other things. Nothing much was happening in the US. My mother, who was doing piecework at the time in Manhattan, found the First Street Settlement House. Recreation rooms of the settlement house, Recro, was their camp. And she got a scholarship for me to go there. And I had gone there, loved the place, worked there, afterwards became a pot washer, became a counselor, became a woodworking specialist, swimming instructor, whatever. It was a great thing in my life, and a great thing in the life of a lot of other kids at that time in Harriman State Park. And I still do a lot of the things that I loved to do at that time. One more thing on Camp Recro. They had one person, an old lady that was funding some of these First Street Settlement House off the Bowery in New York, children of all sorts, all colors, all religions, including Mohammedans, by the way, from Bosnia and elsewhere. Okay, so the old lady invited some representative kids, and they carefully chose kids that could behave themselves. I was one of those. I was trained well in Europe, and I was representing immigrants. And she fed us very dainty finger sandwiches and talked to us about the joys of supporting Camp Recro. So I was part of their promotion as well, it turns out.
Ivan, have you published a book or displayed your drawings publicly?
Excuse me?
Have you published a book or displayed
I
your
have
drawings?
not published it, but it is available for publication if anybody is interested. And I have about 25 pages of endnotes, which are dense information that tries to set up how I try to establish what year I was able to, or what event I was able to link my memories to in doing additional research. So I'm happy to deal with this but I've just been talking to school kids basically, and some other grown-up groups.
And Michelle would like to know, what do you think of the growth of anti-Semitism in today's world? And what should Jews be learning from what happened in the Holocaust in regard to the current anti-Semitism?
Okay, from my grandfather's misconception, even though I served in the US Navy, and even though I am very secular in all my beliefs and everything else, I do believe that there's no getting away from it. I'm a Jew, and I am responsible for other Jews and other people that are perhaps care to be more religious than I. I have to pass that information on to my grandchildren. It is a dangerous world, and it's very difficult to deal with places that are going into a tough time in other senses, because these are tough times with pandemic and everything else. I hold up an earlier headline from backwards, I think, from you, from the New York Times, that says, round up the usual scapegoats. That's from an article about Hungary, of all places. So we are very much endangered again. And I try, when I talk to people, and I talk to people that are in strange situations, in addition to the school groups who will be grown up soon. For example, earlier this spring, I talked to people in the Watervliet Arsenal, 700 of them, that are putting cannons together. And they basically had to hear that their perspective on minorities is important. And that's a message. I talked to the local office of the FBI, and they asked, what laws were you under? And I had to do some research, and I got back to them, and I said, I was probably under about 7 different laws in my first 7 years. the laws can change if you don't keep the government sensible and sensitive. So we have to worry about our rights. We have to worry about other people's rights, because we may not be the first scapegoats. We may be the third or fourth in line.
Okay, so we have two more questions. So Claire would like to know if you still speak Hungarian and mix with other Hungarians.
I still speak Hungarian, and I understand Hungarian to a degree, but going back to Hungary, which I did, I found that I was not I was not able to converse in a very what can I say, comfortable manner, and dealing with unusual things such as dealing with engineering issues and stuff like that. I'm completely out of touch. I'm not able to speak technical stuff, which ironically sounds an awful lot like English distorted. I don't speak to many Hungarians. My wife is Dutch, and I hear as much Dutch occasionally as I do Hungarian, and neither one is very prominent in our lives, unfortunately. I wish I would have kept up not only Hungarian, but Slovak, which I used to also speak.
And this one isn't a question, but one of our viewers is saying, Ivan, your drawings are wonderful. You have a talent. I'm so glad you have published them. They tell your story in a very special way.
Well, thank you very much. And I was known even in work where I had other responsibilities for every once in a while producing a cartoon that dealt with any funny and unpleasant situation we dealt with. And even now, more than 25 years out of my work after my retirement, sometimes people come up with a cartoon and they say, oh yeah, we're still working on that problem. I found the cartoon, well, there it is. Same problem. Haven't solved it yet. So I have exercised it in funny ways.
Ivan, we have some people that would like to try and reach you. Can I share your email address in the chat?
Absolutely, share my email address, and I'd be delighted to answer questions to the best of my ability. And I am available if it's within about an hour drive from Albany. I do have to take care of my wife, who has limits, so I can't stay away for that long. But I'm available to speak to school groups once they are open for that. Thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate your attendance.
Ivan's email is ivanvamos, IVANVAMOS @hotmail.com. Ivan, do you want to leave us with any words today? Any thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, I may add to this that I feel we're in a very dangerous time. I see trends of that I do speak to other Hungarians. I do speak to other people from other countries that have lived through, or at least very strongly relate to these issues. And I see earmarks of the beginning of the 1930s, where rather stable and well-informed and well-meaning countries have problems, and they have problems, and they have sometimes leadership that says, well, I'll find the reason, which is those minorities, the usual suspects, as the New York Times article says about Hungary. It's not a good trend. I worry about it, and I appreciate that the museum covers some of these issues, and I appreciate their allowing me to speak to you.
Ivan, thank you so much for sharing your remarkable story with us today. Your journey with your mother during the war is a powerful reminder both of the capacity of hate and racism to destroy lives and the resilience of the human spirit. We've recorded today's program and we'll email the recording tomorrow to everyone in attendance, along with some suggested follow-up resources. Stay posted for that email in your inbox. And if you found Ivan's presentation meaningful, we hope you'll support the Museum of Jewish Heritage via the link in the Zoom chat. And everything we do, including our work to preserve the stories of Holocaust survivors, is made possible by the generosity of our community members. Thank you once again, Ivan, and take care. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita. I appreciate your help.